Who are you?
I don't know.
Hello, and welcome to Bird Brains, the YouTube channel devoted to all things avian. I'm Lev Purikian, amateur bird watcher, author of Into the Tangled Bank. I'm just going to interrupt that. I'm very happy about this. This is out next Thursday. It's actually out already. It's in the shops already, and I could probably talk all about it for the whole 20 minutes, but we'll just talk about birds. It's great feelings when you get your book, isn't it, David? Because what's your book called?
Bird Watching London.
There you go. So now we've done the plugs. My new book, Into the Tangled Bank, A Journey Through Nature, is out at the moment. And David's Bird Watching London has been out for at least a year. So that's great. And we will say 2 years. Yeah. We will say no more about them. But I might just leave mine. No. Hello and welcome to Bird Brains. David, great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, quite excited about the book thing. But in general, quite well. A little bit sort of bored of this windy weather. I don't do well with wind. I'll say that again. I don't like it when the weather's windy. It plays havoc with my hair, which is getting it even more lockdowny and longer. You don't have that. We're talking about hair all the time now. But apart from that, we're basically fine. What's new in your birding week?
Well, I quite like all the wind. Yeah. I like it because I always think it might blow something in, like there's the opportunity of seeing something rare. And yesterday and on Thursday, there was a black-browed albatross on the Yorkshire coast.
I to mention that same thing. It was at the RSPB Bempton Cliffs Reserve, isn't it? Where they're quite often, I mean, if they're seen albatrosses, it's quite often around that bit of the coastline, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been one that has summered on an island in the North Sea off Germany, and they think that relates to this bird, and it just, as an albatross does, goes for a bit of a wander, ends up in England.
Just a fantastic thing. I think
sits in with some gannets for a few hours and then goes off again.
Albatrosses I think they capture everybody's imagination because they are so dramatic, and the whole thing about the way they can glide and their size and their longevity and everything. But I'm just trying to imagine what the look on the gannet's face as we're the big ones here, and this great big huge thing comes in. So that are you tempted to drive up there? It's a good old drive to Bempton, isn't it?
Oh yeah, if I wasn't busy with work, I would have. If it reappears one evening, I might consider going there for dawn.
Zoom up. Yeah. Excellent. Well, again, it's one of the few things that I would be tempted to go for, and no doubt, knowing my luck, it would have disappeared about 10 minutes before I arrived.
It'll probably clash with work or family events.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so we're not here to talk about albatrosses, really. We're here to talk about corvids, the crow family. We did gulls last week, and gulls are quite unpopular with a lot of people. And I think another family that can be maybe misunderstood or not totally appreciated by everybody are the corvids, the crows and rooks and magpies and jays. So I suppose we start with that, which is, why might people not be keen on them, do you think? What's going on there?
Well, they have a bad reputation for going into birds' nests and stealing eggs and young, and they do this, but not a massive amount, because what you have to remember is they were so prolific at doing this sort of thing, we'll have no young birds, and bird populations will die out. So it's always like this natural balance.
Yeah.
You've got the top predators, like that, very few of them, and then masses of the other species at the bottom. So there's loads of blue tits and wrens and robins all breeding, and then it's just the odd, maybe carrion crow, jackdaw, maybe magpie or jay that will predate birds' nests. I think I've seen one magpie kill a sparrow once, a young sparrow, and that was it ever.
I suppose it's because it does happen to garden birds, so people will quite often see it. I haven't seen it personally, but although our great tits that were nesting in the swift box, there was, as they were beginning to get close to fledging, the local carrion crows did get interested. They came up and stood on the roof for a bit and kind of looked down, but they didn't actually get near them when they were out and about. So I suppose people see it and it's dramatic, and they instantly there's good guy and bad guy.
Yeah.
And obviously the good guy is the fluffy little chick, and the
Mm.
bad guy is the big, dark, menacing predator. But there's an awful lot of that goes on. And the one I always do, which is blue tits murder butterflies, or they murder caterpillars, and
Indeed.
nobody makes any fuss about that. But
Yeah.
it's the balance of its nature, isn't it?
Yeah, song thrushes with snails or what again. But a lot of these creatures are breeding by mass numbers. You know, butterflies lay hundreds of eggs, and they're not expecting hundreds of butterflies to hatch. They're expecting only a few.
Exactly.
And the same with the blue tits and great tits, you know, on the robins, they're potentially having broods of 6, maybe 8 or more, and maybe more than one brood at a time. And therefore, you know, they're expecting a high mortality rate. They're not expecting, otherwise we'll be swamped in robins and blue tits and all the rest of it. We'll be like covered in butterflies. It'd be awful. You know, that's the whole premise of it, is you have mass numbers at the bottom and fewer at the top. And then, you know, a few will survive out of these large populations.
I suppose it's the same with the more, you know, the raptors, the more obvious birds of prey, like peregrines and things. And people, again, they kind of go, oh, they revile them. But actually the presence of these birds in any area is a really good sign that the local ecosystem is doing quite well. There's enough food for them to live on so that they can stick around.
Very similar to when people blame stuff like sparrowhawks for the lack of songbirds.
Yeah.
You know, sparrowhawks aren't that prolific. My sparrowhawk that breeds in the air and comes in the garden, you know, he's not that successful. He'll come in 3 or 4 times, and I think this week I've seen him about 10 times. I think only once with prey. Right,
yeah. I suppose that actually leads into something else we're going to talk about with the corvids, which is that they can be quite unpopular on farmland, which brings it, it's a very sensitive subject, I know, because farming is a huge industry and provides us with our food, and I'm not an expert in the subject at all. But I know that crows and other corvids can be unpopular with farmers who are trying to grow their food, and they get the seeds in, and immediately a whole load of birds and wood pigeons and things like that will come and take them out.
But these are just intelligent, opportunist birds, and that's the thing. They see the farmer going out, you know, sowing the seeds, and, you know, they think, oh, well, there's some food, which there is. You know, it's a similar way in which that on my bird feeder in my garden, I noticed that my fat ball holder was on the floor. And I was thinking, how did I get on the floor? Was it the badgers or the foxes? What's going on? And then I saw the carrion crow on top, and what he would do was he would pick up the whole fat ball holder and then drop it onto the ground and then tip them all out and fly off with one at a time to feed on it. So they're just being clever, they're being intelligent, you know, and generally there's ways around which is quite harmless to the bird to find a solution.
Well, good old scarecrows, I suppose, but they're slightly more modern equivalents than wurzel gummidge. I suppose one should inform oneself quite well about this kind of thing, because it's quite important to nature as a whole, in the countryside and wildlife everywhere. Thinking about the cleverness issue, I've been reading this book recently, rereading actually. It's called The Genius Birds by Jennifer Ackerman. It's brilliant. It's a really excellent popular science book about how brilliant birds are. I think there's a lot for anybody in it. And as looking at the index entry on crows, she's an American writer, so some of them are American things, but there's about 20 entries under crows, and a lot of them are to do with the intelligence. So adult tutoring of juveniles in toolmaking, reasoning, genetic predisposition to tool use and that kind of thing, and grieving type behaviors. So there's brain size as well. So there's a lot of things that crows have in common with us, which is that they are capable of working out that kind of thing. The one that I saw, which was quite widely distributed, was the American crow, I think it was, that had worked out that if it wanted to get some food, I think it was by dropping stones into water, it could raise the water level, and therefore I think they wanted rows to higher in the receptacle they were trying to get it from. And there's all sorts of examples about their intelligence. So we welcome all kinds of corvids. I suppose another thing that it doesn't work necessarily in their favour is that they're generally, as a family, they're not that colourful, which probably leads us quite nicely into the identification tips.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I always say is that often when you look at these species, is that when you get really close up to them and see them very well, you can see all their pristine little feather patterns which makes it really much more interesting. You know, the glossy tones of a carrion crow and stuff like that. Really, really attractive, I think.
Yeah, lovely. I think they're great as well. And certainly with rooks, which is the middle bird there, you'll see a sort of purplish gloss in sunshine, won't you? Which is really very attractive. Off you go. Tell us all about these birds.
So here we go. We've got the 3 dark corvids, the common species. There are another 2, but we're going to do them another time perhaps. So basically it's really looking at the head and the size. So the carrion crow and rook, very similar in shape and size, and basically what we're going to focus on is the bill. So the rook has that really grey, silvery base to the bill with a dark end, okay, and the carrion crow is just all black all over, which makes it very, very straightforward to look at when you see them. Then we've got the jackdaw as well, which is right on the end. He's a lot smaller, or she, and she's got the lovely silvery looking eye with the grey nape. The grey nape isn't always perhaps so easy to see, depends on the light and the distance, but normally the silvery eye and that very sort of like short squishy bill is also very apparent as well.
I like the also just looking at the bills of the rook and the carrion crow as well. The carrion crow I've always thought has a more curve. The curve of it is more obvious, but that's something to do with the way it runs into the head, isn't it? You can see that the rook there has a bit more of an angle to the forehead. Yeah,
it's also feathered along the rook, on the carrion crow, along the top of the bill as well. But there's loads of little minute things you can look at.
Yeah,
and the calls are very different as well. It's just really getting that stepping stone into them. One of the big misconceptions is about how many you see, and if you see a lot of birds, they're all going to be rooks. It's really only to do with breeding.
Yeah.
So at the breeding time, in the breeding season, carrion crows nest singly in one tree on their own, one nest. Rooks have a rookery, so you can have anything between 5 to 6 to a few hundred nests in a very small area. So that's a real big difference. Otherwise, you can get them flocking up together in different areas all the time.
Would it be fairish to say that if you're in a predominantly or very urban environment, it's more likely to be a carrion crow? Rooks are more birds of farmland?
Generally are, but the only trouble is there's a place in Suffolk that I've been working recently, and there's a big flock of carrion crows sitting around there all the time. Like one area's got carrion crows, another section's got all rooks. So in an urban environment, generally it's mostly carrion crows, but there are some urban settings where you do get a lot of rooks, especially where it's smaller as well.
Right, and where you got the right trees for them to build there.
Yeah. Trees and feeding area, I think, is a critical thing. So we'll move on to the more attractive looking species. Oh, look, I've done the other bits of the jackdaw.
I love jackdaws. I love jackdaws. I love the sound they get their name from. That spreading of the chack through the flock is just fantastic.
Yeah, very very nice sounding bird.
Yeah.
Okay, so a bit of splash of colour, and we've got 2 common species and 1 more localised one in here. So we've got the hooded crow, the magpie, and the jay. The magpie and the jay are the ones that we're going to see the most. Jay, very, very distinctive. It's not really massively like any of the other species because it's got this really long tail on it, and it's mostly black with a bit of white. And when we see them up close, they've got these beautiful iridescent sheens on them. You can see the green on the tail here standing very well, and they've got some purpley, bluey bits in them as well. Absolutely great.
Magpies, I think that people quite often think of them as just black and white, but there is that, again, like the rook, but even more so, you've got that fantastic splash of greens and purples and blues. I think you might just have said jay instead of magpie, but I'll let it go.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, I think so. It's all right. We're fine. Moving on to the jay, David.
The jay. Well, I mean, jays are absolutely beautiful, and they're mostly just pink, really. Very, very, very obvious when you see them, with a lovely, colourful blue section on the wing. And when they fly, they've got a nice big white rump as well, which stands out like a sore thumb, which I really enjoy. In the autumn, we tend to see a bit more of them as they roam around a bit more, and you can see them in small flocks flying about. I really love jays. They're one of my favourite species to see.
They are mine as well. And as you say, around autumn when the acorns are coming out, they go around collecting them and they'll put them in their crop, won't they? And bury them for later retrieval.
Yeah, another sucker for peanuts. Put peanuts in your garden. My local jays will come down and stuff their gobs full. You can see their crop bulging with them as they just swallow those.
We had, for the first time, we had an occasional jay in our garden over the years, maybe once a month, every 6 weeks or so. We had one on the top feeder, the one nearest, literally on the top feeder the other day, which had never happened before. And it stayed there for about 10 minutes. So it must have been hungry.
Hungry, yeah, definitely.
So just going back, though, to the hooded crow, which is not something we'll see in London unless, well, a very rare visit.
A miracle. Yeah, you get them more further up north, like in the Scottish Highlands, that sort of way.
Yeah.
And they're fairly common up that way. Very different to the carrion crow and having a nice big all grey body to them, but they've got the black head and black rear and black wings. So stand out very well.
But they are very closely related to the carrion crow, aren't they?
Yeah, they used to be considered the same species and just a race, but now they're considered two separate species.
And there's a line across northwest Scotland around there where you will see until you cross the line, there's carrion crows, and then afterwards it's hooded crows, and there's an area where they mix a bit.
But as you head further east through Europe, you get more of them as well. So Northern Europe has a lot more hooded crows than Eastern Europe as well. And you can even go to some very hot countries and see them. I think I've seen them in Sardinia and in Israel and places like that. So
excellent. So those are a great family. Have you got any more slides, by the way, or is that it?
That's it.
Oh,
two.
Just to very briefly mention the other two that we will get onto at some other time. Which
we've got the raven, which is about double the size of a carrion crow, has a great big conch of a bill on it. They're really spreading in numbers. So they used to be mostly on the west coast and further up north. Now they're across the home counties, breeding around the edge of London. So they're going to make a big difference in the next 10, 20 years. And then finally you got the chough, which we get on the west coast of the UK, in Wales, a small population in Cornwall, and also around Scotland as well. And they're like a smaller carrion crow with great big red down curved bill as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic.
Big red legs as well.
Yeah,
red legs. Beautiful birds.
Fantastic splash of colour. An amazing call as well. That sort of thing. And all the other calls are kind of different. And magpies. I always range of sounds, and carrion crows as well. It's amazing.
Yeah. I always think that a jackdaw always goes jack, jack. Very classic. Carrion crow has more of a R to it, like a pirate. Where a rook is more of a or deeper, or that's how I remember it.
Excellent. Well, we can get onto those some other time. That's covered all sorts of things. Thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And
you, Lev.
Thank you. We will see. We were so professional today. I thought we were great. We will see you next time. Oh, look. We will see you next time.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. It just jumped into my hands. See you soon. Bye.
See you later. Bye.